Thank you for your attendance. No mai haere mai tātou ki o tai mai nei o tēnei hui. Anei taku karakia. Mā te whakapono, mā te tumanako, mā te whakarongo, mā te atatitaro, mā te mahitahi, mā te manawa nui, ka tae mātou, ka tae tātou. Welcome everyone. I have two apologies which I'd like to move. We have Mayor Stoltz and Councillor Rea, seconded by Councillor Parihinga. No declarations of minutes. I'd like to acknowledge Nikki Sarank up the back there. This is to do with the Makorori master plan. There's been a long involvement with the Sarank family as landowners there, and it's been a really great process. I had a lot to do with Nikki's mum, Ingrid, and the involvement with Nikki's mum was learning the stories of Makorori, which was awesome. Ingrid had all the stories out there and all the history, and it was very beneficial to this process to know those stories. And it's very appropriate that we do tell those stories and have them more publicly acknowledged. So good to see you here, Nikki. No declaration of interest. We'll go straight to the confidential, non-confidential minutes. Page 4. No matters arising. I'll move those minutes. Seconded by Councillor Foster. All those in favour? Against? Carried. I haven't been acknowledged of any leave of absence. I'm not sure if we've got anyone on Zoom, councillor-wise. I know we've got Nadine on Zoom. She's a bit crook at the moment, so she's Zooming in there. And
Councillor Pratt is on her way from
she's
the
on her way.
mechanics.
She's not,
Yeah,
okay,
she's
thank
waiting
you
for
for
taxi.
that. Okay. And we will have later on for the presentation Amy England and Jean Takarua when we're dealing with the cyclone recovery update. Acknowledgements and tributes. I think it's appropriate that Council acknowledge the recent acknowledgement of Sir Selwyn Parata. It's good to see that efforts are acknowledged and good to see it when it's done on a local basis. So congratulations to Sir Selwyn. I'm sure he's got lots more to do still. It's not the end of the road, but yeah. Yeah. All right, public input and petitions, nothing there. No extraordinary business, no notice of motion, and no adjourned business. So we go straight into page 11, which is the draft Makorori master plan for consultation. Been working on this for many years, as I say, and right from way back, but it is acknowledged that this is a very special area to our region, and it's good to see that we're really acknowledging that and coming up with a plan. So who's going to lead that? Have we got Tyler leading that? Okay, thank you, Tyler.
Morena koutou. I'll probably just start with a tautoko to your point, Andy. Yeah, we wouldn't be here able to talk about the Makorori master plan without the really generous input of Kōpia Nikki Sarank and the wider Makorori hapu. So hugely appreciative for the massive amount of time and knowledge that's been put into the process so far. And the intent today really is to give councillors an opportunity to engage with the draft plan, to talk through the process to date, and to answer any questions that you might have and kind of discuss the process for engagement here forward. But, you know, at a high level, we've talked for a very long time about developing a guiding document for Makorori Beach. And it has been a critical need because of the amount of use that beach sees and the associated pressures. In the 2021 LTP, we committed to installing bollards to address some of the immediate needs with dune restoration, but also to developing a management plan to take a longer term view for how that beach is managed. We got close in January. It was just about finished, and then we had successive cyclones that really placed a strain on our workload and forced us to put this thing on hold, and also to a time in which our community were ready to engage with this conversation again. I think we'd admit that it's still not that perfect time, but we're having to weigh up the work that's been done, the relevance of the consultation that we've done to date and the engagement of the community with it, in seeing this as a suitable time to then go back out and consult on a plan that is effectively almost finished. We have reviewed its content with a recovery and a post-cyclone lens, and we think that it remains relevant and more necessary than ever. Two kind of key findings of that: Makorori exists in a very short and steep catchment, so it hasn't had the same effects with sedimentation or woody debris that we have in some other areas. But also an aggravating factor is that the effects at other beaches have driven more recreation to Makorori. So some of those key pressures of recreation on the natural environment, we do anticipate being worsened. So I think this work is more important than ever. We're proposing, should council be happy, to progress with public consultation on the draft plan, and that would include an online survey where people could read the plan and effectively tell us how well we've captured their input into the plan to date. So we have been out last year to ask for people's overarching views, how they use the beach, how they would like to see the beach managed, and what they'd like to see achieved in a master plan. We want to go back and ask them, how well did we capture that, and does the plan reflect your input to date? We're also proposing reconvening our community reference group. So that's our specialist input of user groups, residents of Hapu, and working through the plan at a more detailed level, and then having a cup of tea with any stakeholder groups that want to meet individually as well. So consulting for a month to then refine the plan and bring it back to council with a view to adopt, should councillors be happy to for that process to proceed. I think as you're reading the plan, it exists in three parts. Part one is an introduction that really lays out how a master plan functions, what it's intended to do, what it can do and what it can't do. It's a spatial and it's a strategic document. It's not statutory and it's not policy, but it intends to inform some of those later processes. The second part and the meaty part of the plan is really what we learned in the process. What are the issues and what are the opportunities? But where the rubber hits the road is part three, which is the maps and the key moves in the vision. And that's really, with all that we've learned and all that we've done, what do our community tell us that they want us to achieve? There are 7 key moves in it, but I think really you can boil it down to 2 functions. One is to delineate car parking areas and create a healthier dune system that people can move through more freely and has more recreational benefit. In particular, being able to restore the back dune, which currently has a lot of vehicle impacts, but could be a place for vegetation that creates a more resilient beach. And the second is to capture and share Makorori's history and significance to mana whenua, and to connect today's use with its historic use. So creating place-based learning in a far richer visitor experience, as well as a place that reflects its history and its people. One other person that I should mention as well is, I think we're here having this conversation because of the tireless work of Pat Seymour as well. She's a huge champion of alleviating some of the pressures at this beach and of having a guiding plan. So I'm very thankful for that. But that's probably about all there is to say. Taking the plan as read, but this is a great opportunity for any questions that you might have on it or discussion around how we progress from here.
Thanks, Tyler. Do we have funding in place for implementation, or how's that going to work?
There are some of the actions which can be achieved with existing budgets, but the timing of this is with a view that we can consider that through the next long-term or planning device that we have.
Yep. Councillor Begley.
Thank you. I just also wanted to support what Tyler just said about Pat. She was really tireless with this and always kept us on task and informed about getting this going. And I just have one question on page 55 with regards to the camping bylaw, the freedom camping bylaw. Just wondering how far away that is to be updated.
I know it's in our focus. I don't think we have a program date, and that's something that we'll have to come back to councillors on.
Yeah, I was
Sure.
through you, your chair. I was just going to say it's not in the current work program. We have spent considerable staff time and efforts on reviewing the bylaw several times over the last few years. So it's not in the near future of the work program.
Just on that issue, I think I kind of read that the car parking where the camping goes on at the moment's to be moved to somewhere else. Are we looking at taking all the camping out of the current site and putting it somewhere else, and why?
So what we heard in consultation was that the placement of the freedom camping at the moment has two impacts. It has grown over time to the point where it takes up a large amount of the car park at the bottom of the hill, which some would know as Red Bus. When you have a very busy day, especially in summer, the freedom camping sites mean that the car park very quickly becomes full, and the pressures overflow then onto private land. So by allocating so many car parks, we're hearing that we're actually driving more vehicle impacts onto adjoining landowners. The master plan proposes that we would move those sites to the middle of the beach, and that's shown in the maps. The view for that is that freedom camping does have some benefit. It provides some passive surveillance to a beach that doesn't otherwise have any housing, and so it may, or it's expected to reduce issues like midnight four-wheel driving and dumping, potentially, and move it to a space which has less recreational pressure.
That would necessitate a toilet. Is a toilet essential for freedom camping sites?
It's a bit of thinking happening on that at the moment.
Exactly.
We have no policy. Yeah, we have no policy around bathrooms needing to be located with freedom camping. Yet we often do that. In the plan, we have proposed a new waterless bathroom alongside the freedom camping parks in a new visitor destination in the middle of the beach.
Councillor Foster, and then hi, welcome. That's it.
Congratulations all for this management plan. I've been involved with this for a long time as well with Andy, and seeing its inception and the consultation process with all the users, board riders. I mean, I've used this area for a long time. I was originally a freedom camper there back in the day. So yeah, it's a very special part of this region, and with having two surf breaks of national significance here as well is very significant. And we've always been trying to identify this area and possibly have it as a first surfing reserve in New Zealand, and that still could be on the table with this management plan to start with. One thing I did notice with reading through the whole management plan, there's no mention of any speed restrictions. I know that's not possibly involved with this, and it's another area, but it would be quite good if the management plan did promote some speed restrictions on that beach, because that is a major concern of all the users of the beach and all the residents. So yeah, I would just recommend, even if we could be supportive of the process of speed restrictions on that beach, that would be great. But congratulations to all. This is it's fantastic to see this management plan in inception invested.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Parata.
Aroha mai morena tātou. E mihi ana ki tēnei reporta, Tyler, ngā mihi nui kia koe me te tīma. Thank you so much for this great report. What I really like about the report is the cultural sensitivities and efforts I can see that is taken to acknowledge the history of Makorori, its story, and all of the histories that it has. So I really appreciate having a report that's taken the effort to engage and consult and then bring that back to this table. Thank you so much. The two major things that I thought or had concerns about was the risks around community expectations. This report is stunning, but how do we go about managing the expectations of the community and what we can actually deliver in realistic timeframes? Lots of the issues we're facing now as council is about the expectations of our community and our ability to actually deliver to that expectation. So that's the first thing. The second thing I just wanted to clarify or ask was about whenua Māori. I couldn't tell if it was just general title land along that waterfront, or if there are any whenua Māori blocks that are encompassed into the plan.
My understanding is all of the beachfront land is general title, although a large portion remains owned by its or descendants of its original owners. And I think on the question of community expectation, it will be really key in communicating that this is it's a generational plan. It's a 30-year vision, and the idea of planning it all at once is so that it functions together. But we will have to be really careful that it doesn't come across as an immediate implementation plan.
Just one more question. So the beach front is typically general title, but behind it, do we know if any of those blocks are whenua Māori, the ones that are undeveloped?
Nikki's indicated she knows the answer to that.
Thank you, Nikki.
Aroha mai.
Kia ora tātou, Mr. Chairmana. So in the past, we lost our land and we bought it back. We bought it as part of the Paua block. And yes, we do have a whenua trust existing over part of it. That's your answer.
Thank you, Nikki. Councillor Robertson.
If we can just go back to the camping issue, I read it, but I can't find it again. I thought there was only 8 designated freedom camping spots in Red Bus Car Park. That's correct, though. So, Todd, I understood you before say there's issues with it overflowing onto other spaces. On all of Makorori Beach, there's only 8 designated freedom camping spots, right?
What I understand is that those camping spots have been extended since they were originally put in. That's what we've heard in the consultation. I think
so can you clarify that? Expanded when? Because we set numbers for freedom camping spots at Makorori at 8, like within my living memory. So it must be like within the last 3 months, probably my goldfish lens. Well, within the last year, we've done that. It's across this table, and I'm absolutely certain we set a surprisingly low number of freedom camping spots at Makorori. So I'm trying to reconcile that lawful number with what you've told us about overflow and.
We can go away and clarify exactly what was set initially, and then what exists today, and how that sits with the bylaw. I think anecdotally, what you tend to see is the designated freedom campsites, and then a lot of camping tourism that exists during the day as well, and whether that continues overnight or whether that's people that are staying there waiting for a park to become available. I'm unsure, but you would definitely see on the average busy day freedom camping tourism extending far beyond the freedom designated sites.
I want to tease this out a wee bit. That's an assumption there, because you could have people who pulled up in a camper van waiting to be out for a surf, not necessarily freedom camping per se. So because I somehow did not pick this up when I read this, what is the proposal to do? What is the proposal regarding freedom camping for Makorori under this plan?
So the proposal for freedom camping in the plan is to remove the freedom campsites at the southern end car park, Red Bus Car Park, and move those entirely to a new car park in the middle of the beach, which would be known as Waifakata, which would have a new waterless wharepaku as well.
And that will enable the 8 sites to be there.
We haven't specified numbers, but it would enable freedom campsites to exist there. Freedom camping, not summer camping.
And will that site be enabled before the other one is disabled?
That is an implementation
It's going to come
decision.
down to dollars, isn't it? That we don't have the funding necessarily to create a new space.
So through you, your chair, we wouldn't change the bylaw until the physical infrastructure was in place to enable the bylaw to be implemented.
I want to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Older.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank you for the report. It's an excellent picture of where we've got to today. I'd like to move this document. And in doing, I'd also like to thank Pat Seymour on behalf of us, and in particular on behalf of the residents of Makorori, who she's worked tirelessly with. We're never going to please all of the people all of the time with this satisfying our use of this beautiful environment. But I think this is going a long way to do that and preserve this beautiful environment. So I think we've kicked off well, and with a little bit more work and we're going to get there. Thank you.
So final question really is, what does the consultation look like? I expect that the freedom camping issue will come through consultation discussion quite a bit. What's the intention of the consultation? How's it going to?
So the proposed consultation from here is making the plan available online alongside an online survey. It's making it available in person as well, both here and at the library. It's a targeted or a community reference group hui with our existing community reference group that has representation from residents, from our key user groups like the Board Riders and the Motorcycle Club, Forest and Bird, DOC, etc., and mana whenua in that group. And then there'll be some stakeholder workshops as well. Like I expect we'll be continuing to work directly with Hapu. We'll have any other stakeholders that would like to reach out and have a specific conversation around their particular kaupapa over the next month, with a view to refine that and bring back a change proposal for the plan.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Atamaria kia tātou, tēnā koe Tyler. I was excited reading this report because I like pictures and I thought it was beautifully presented, as well as easy to understand. As like Councillor Parata, I enjoyed reading about the history of Makorori or Makorori. It has nothing to do with sharks, as I thought it might have had. So I learned a lot in reading this and can see that there's been a lot of mahi gone into it. I just had a question on page 42 about the orange zones, potential for very severe soil slips, moderate earth flows, and given what we now are experiencing with climate change and constant rain, has there been any consideration around how that might affect the plan? Climate change focus? Yeah, kia ora.
Yeah, I think with the land instability and coastal hazards piece, what we found is that we have an increasing need for a resilient dune system. Makorori exists in a relatively closed system, which means that sand and sediment tends to move within the beach. So it's not necessarily subject to other coastal pressures, but it does place a greater importance on a dune system which can capture and continue to capture sand and respond to the effects of climate change. In terms of land instability, it will really affect our thinking, and it has affected our thinking in terms of infrastructure on and adjacent to the hill slopes, especially north and south of the beach. We have taken a view from the highway to the mean high water spring because the adjacent farmland is private and little effect could be had through a master plan, and the takutai moana is not a focus of the master plan and not something that you would capture in a master plan. So that's sort of been the limited scope, I suppose. So yet we're wary of the impacts that exist in that wider landscape, but also the master plan can largely only respond to those rather than fully mitigate or prevent those impacts.
You just mentioned then that that's private land along the which is above the highway, but and it doesn't come under the master plan. But I think that's these sort of situations is where, by going and actually talking to those private landowners, I think people might be surprised how willing they are to come on board, and it may mean planting poplars or whatever in some of those things. So I think just because it's in private ownership shouldn't be a reason not to go and knock on someone's door and have a talk to them about it, because they live there too, so they will have a real interest in that beach and how it operates as well. So I wouldn't use that as a reason for not to look at what's happening on that big face there, which is going to impact. Sure, that beach has not got a river flowing into it, which it's probably lucky compared to a lot of areas around Te Rāwhiti at the moment. But I don't think private landowners live in this area too, and I think just by going knocking on someone's door and having a talk, you can actually you'd be quite surprised how they come on board and be willing to participate if they probably just aren't aware that that potentially is something that needs to be.
Thanks for that. Councillor Whare.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to second the report. Second Councillor Elder's movement of the report. It's great to have an overall guiding document in order to be able to help us with our planning around Makorori. For just to kind of give context to, prior to having this plan, there were a lot of decisions that our community wanted us to make, but there was kind of no jointly agreed master document that would help guide those kōrero. So I really want to acknowledge the hapu of Makorori, the Sarank whānau for feeding into this. The residents also at Makorori, it was that kōrero, that functional kōrero of a lot of people going on and doing four-wheel driving all over that beach and through these dunes and all of that kind of stuff, and then that was one of the triggers, as well as our Makorori hapu whānau, Sarank whānau kind of go, hey, council, we need you to do these things too. So when I look at this plan, it's this amalgamation of our community saying, hey, we need you to do and respond, council, which brings me to my next acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge staff. This has been a difficult environment to land the plan. The plan's been great. Everybody's loved engaging over the plan, but we've had cyclone after cyclone. We've had lockdowns. We've had all sorts of different things that have been happening through us while we've been trying to land this plan. So I want to acknowledge staff as well for bringing it here. That's why I'm more than happy to see this.
Thank you, Councillor Whare. Councillor Robinson.
I remember a certain councillor used to say someone stole their thunder. I want to just talk about what Councillor Whare has just said. I meant to say when I was talking about the camping, I want to acknowledge the staff's efforts in preparing this report. This is a marvellous report. It's a marvellous example of what we can do when we work with manu whenua, and I specifically want to acknowledge the Sarank whānau and the hapu of Makorori, and also acknowledge that, as is acknowledged in the report, your resources are disproportionate to ours to achieve this, and the efforts put in by you and your whānau and the hapu to get to this place is much, much greater than actually what we have put in, because you're so less resourced than we are. So thank you so much. This is an amazing plan for our region, and an amazing template for what can be achieved. So kapai all round.
Thank you. Councillor Tupara.
Yes, I'd like to congratulate staff and the community for the input that have gone into this report. I do have some matters of concern, however, and this is perhaps around how council conducts itself and creates expectation in the community. And but given the robust cultural context of this report, it creates an expectation that will live up to that cultural context. And we've opened the door, particularly for Ngā Tūrone to come through and involve themselves significantly in the drafting of the report, which on the face of it seems fine. But council is entering into a world where some of that culture and history is contestable. And if we publish that in our reports, then we do open ourselves to be part of that contest. Again, which for me personally is fine. It's whether or not we are robust enough to hold our report up during that contest. And we create an expectation, particularly with Ngā Tūrone, that we intend to do that. we intend to take that culture and history and put that into a public arena, and as was suggested, to become part of a place-based learning program for that place, which is excellent. It's whether or not when the contest arrives in this chamber, as submitters, whether or not we're robust enough to stand up to our own report. And I think it's something that I'm extremely cautious about, given other experiences here in the chamber where our culture is put forward, but doesn't have the stability that it needs when we want to engage in that. And we tend to put these things up, culturally paint things a beautiful picture, and then when it starts to collapse, we just leave it to our community to fight over. And I have a concern about that. So I'm happy that it's in there. I'm happy that it's bold, but we need to be bold in the way that we stand up for the cultural contribution that the hapu have made. And we don't start backpedaling when things start getting rough. And we are entering into kōrero that was part of a Māori land court debate that happened when the land was lost, and the whanaunga there has already indicated that they had to purchase that land back. That when there was a dispute amongst hapu, amongst iwi, about who should be the mana whenua for that land, and that has come through our Waitangi tribunal processes in particular, that kind of debate and contest, council is now saying we want to be part of that. So I hope council's prepared when it walks through the door and it stands down there and starts doing a haka. How robust are we? And that's a flag I want to raise in terms of this. Don't play around with the cultural heritage stuff. It's taonga, it's significant, it's important. It comes down to the soul of the reirua, of the whenua, of the ocean, and of the community. It's not ours just to paint pretty pictures and reports to. So when we do that boldly and bravely, and we prepare ourselves for what is to come. The same way that we're preparing ourselves in the report to follow about how we recover from the cyclone. A cultural cyclone is likely to come. So we cannot take this stuff lightly or get too self-indulgent that we're doing well, we're doing good, it looks good. Because if we are going to go in there as council, we just need to be prepared. It's not a question or anything, it's just a comment, your chair. Just to ensure that the appropriate respect and acknowledgements are also robustly behind the community reports that we put out there.
Akati, morena tātou, tēnā tātou ngā uri a rākai a tāne a hine haere taua. Kei te mihi atu ki te hohonu, ki te whānui, ki te whāro ngā kōrero I whakapukapukangia I konei, kia ki te atu te matu o te oroko haga mai, nā wai te whenua nei ne, o reira mihi ana ki a kōrua. Kāti ka tahuri atu ki a tātou. Tēnā tātou at the council, as is Māori fashion to acknowledge the arrival of mana whenua here, I took the opportunity to acknowledge them in what are our traditional ways. Two matters, I'll come to the first one first, and that is in regard to the matters that Councillor Tupara has raised. One of the things that I've noticed over the 7 months of our journey as new councillors is that often we are provided with frameworks and frameworks that set a criteria to determine the value of something. And I'm reminded in one aspect recently with regard to the community housing policy. In those frameworks, often the metering of the frameworks from 100% put culture at risk with a 5% denotation. So my interest in this particular piece of work in line with what Councillor Tupara said. Where is the space that enables the cultural aspect of the mana rākaya tāne and hine haere taua, who have a historical connection to the land that actually goes back 46 generations, as opposed to our council role, which has at best 6 generations involvement and 6 generations of management of that. What weighting can be considered in the framework of doing these things? The reason I ask is because the bulk of the report itself, while it is a stunning report, and I agree with that, it is a stunning report for report's sake, at the same time it marginalizes and can be seen to, because that framing politically in this community might have that marginalized, and there is that as a high aspect of audit and risk in relation to Māori community. No doubt, other community stakeholders will feel equally so, but when you are the minority as rākaya tāne and hine haere taua in there, who are, as I've stated, have 46 years of occupation and management of that space, it becomes quite difficult. So I think that's front and centre, and I just wanted to back up and give further substantiation to Councillor Tupara's concerns. Now, the other matter I wish to come to, and may I say too that in those concerns, what we're actually meeting here, why they are concerns, is the space where local council is being asked to consider in a way Māori desires, needs and wants to develop and manage that actually haven't been front and centre in any large way. So this is the reason why it becomes important to actually keep that at the centre of matters. Also aware that we have our Treaty of Waitangi policy, and that's absolutely fabulous. The question is, where does that fit in this piece of work in relation to the document, because I'm not sure. Now, moving forward to my second question is, I noticed in the beautiful part that talks about the indigenous species of flora and fauna that are on Makorori Beach versus the introduced species. My question is, of those that are front and on the foreshore itself, this is in comparison to the indigenous flora and fauna versus the introduced flora and fauna, which ones actually take care of holding the dune together? Because in our histories, Pingao is absolutely awesome at doing that, and I can't see that. It's actually been used all around Aotearoa to be able to hold dunes together. And then, of course, the other aspect is, if you're not mitigating to protect the dunes and you're not actually using endemic species, i.e. native species, to do that, then where is the largest in terms of that choosing of an introduced species over the regeneration of a native species to do the same job? So these are the contestations in relation to the flora and fauna. These are the contestations in terms of where tangata whenua realities in relation to the representation of rākaya tāne and hine haere taua uri in the space. And it's a big kōrero, because it's not a kōrero that is often articulated in spaces like these. So I just place that and say, it's wonderful to see your report. I concur with my fellow councillors that the detail of it is a fabulous read, but I do have deep concerns about how these can become more politically marginalised, not only in the human aspect, but also in the flora and fauna aspect, that they may become marginalised. And on the balance of what you see there on the dunes, in terms of native species versus introduced species, the swing of balance is actually for introduced species. And to me, that is actually a rhetoric that needs to be corrected, so you can put back what is endemic to the land. Kia ora tātou.
Good. Yep. All right.
I think I can definitely jump into the first question. I think the second, with the specificity of dune species, I might call on David, if that's okay. Getting a bit beyond my knowledge level on that one, but I think so in terms of how partnerships and the significance of the role of the the descendants and the occupation of Rakaiatani and Hirihaine and Hinihaere Taua is represented in the plan. There isn't a framework and there isn't a prioritization matrix behind it at the moment. The idea as a spatial plan is that it has, it's examined all issues, factors and opportunities and presented a future state. We've had feedback that a implementation plan would be really valuable alongside the final plan, and that would have to have some level of prioritization to give council guidance as to which options are pursued in the short, medium and longer term, and at a high level, the expected costs of each of those. What I would say is that I'd be confident that wouldn't represent a marginalisation, and that would give appropriate mana and weight to those projects that are long overdue. But yeah, at present, there's not a matrix behind the plan. It's very much a master plan is a spatial plan that is very much form and function, how a place looks, feels and works for the environment and for people moving through a space. In how the treaty policy is reflected in the plan and how that how those two work together, I think that the potentially where that is likely to sit is in the quality or the framework of the relationship that's formed with Hapu as an implementation action for the plan. So we have proposed formalizing and making more sustainable that relationship and setting some shared outcomes for that, because we've noted as a constraint for all of the opportunities and what we would like to deliver, to bring back or to bring forth the kind of heritage of that space that has to be delivered in partnership with Hapu. And so the first outcome has to be kind of a shared kawa and agreement around that. Yeah. Were you able to talk to Dune species, David?
Kia ora, my name's David. The intention definitely is to replace exotic species with native species, and I just wrote some notes as you were speaking to say we might need to clarify that a bit more if it didn't come through. Don McLean, yeah, he's done a brilliant report for us. He did an assessment of the whole site, and so that's where basically that palette comes from. But yeah, we'll double check and make sure it's clear.
Thank you. All right, let's give that a good burst, and it's just to approve the public consultation on the draft Makorori plan, which has been moved by Councillor Order and seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. If there's nothing further, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Okay. What's that? Quarter to 10? Cup of tea or straight into the next one? Cup of tea, okay. 15 minutes. All right, thank you. Okay, we're on to page 57, which is the Liveable Community Cyclone Recovery Update. Michelle's got lots of her staff members here to give us an update from their appropriate perspective. So I'll just hand that, and it's just a noting report, so I'll just hand that over to Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you. Liveable Communities, we thought it might be timely to provide you with an update and an overview of the recovery work and priorities for the Liveable Communities Hub so far. So I guess key points: during and immediately post-cyclone, many of the teams were deployed to critical tasks and they were working out in the community. And gradually, as facilities began to reopen, staff did return to their BAU. So as you'll be aware, we do have a large operational function out there, but we also do have capital projects as well within our portfolio. So the team are going to share with you an overview of the impact on our hub, and we are going to kick off with Nat Waihi. So thank you.
Kia ora koutou, Natalie Wahiaho, Team Leader of Liveable Spaces Performance and Projects. So I lead the team who, as Michelle mentioned, implement our capital projects and host Gabrielle as thank you. Better? Beautiful, thank you. And post Cyclone, as Michelle mentioned, our first couple of weeks we're really in that response mode, working out in that community and then returning to our space. Okay, beautiful, thank you. That one's working. Thank you. Sorry, technology. As we started to go out into the community and visit our reserves, it was quite obvious to us that they had been impacted like much of our region. And we'll go through a couple of those key reserves and impacted sites for you, just to give you a bit of an understanding. So Anzac Park Reserve, which is behind us across, you'll know, may be familiar with, is a key location for many of our water code and community groups. So we have rowing, kayaking and waka ama who all utilise Anzac Park very frequently, so multiple times during the week, and have club rooms within the site. This site was one of our most impacted reserves. The silt or sediment deposit that filled this reserve covered 2 tiers. So there's 3 tiers to the reserve, and this, the sediment covered 2 tiers. It swallowed the steps, the boat ramps, all of the assets, and unfortunately flooded the club rooms of the water code users. So there was a significant impact to those clubs, and we were supporting them quite closely in those first couple of weeks as they navigated yellow sticker processes, red stickers, dealing with their insurance, and also safety to enable them to enter the site. So that was one of the first steps we took, was a safety approach, which allowed immediate works to occur to create a safe access point to the reserve so that the clubs could take on that process of accessing their sheds and dealing with insurance. From there, we started to do a little bit more of a step back and a planning approach to what it would look like for our reserve in the future, and what this volume of sediment meant for us. Tyler and myself worked quite closely to think around lots of planning implications and what it meant for the reserve. And we had hoped in our first plans that we would be able to re-level some of the areas and not have to remove all of the sediment, so that obviously we could speed up the process of reopening the reserve. Unfortunately, the ground conditions and the volume of water within the sediment did not provide for that. So the methodology was changed and we have removed sediment from the reserve entirely. That process is nearly complete. At current estimate, there's about 1,500 cubic metres of silt that has been removed from the site of sediment, which is a huge volume. I know when we all visited the site, we were a bit, oh, that's a lot. But as it was cleaned up and piled up by contractors and we could really see the work in progress, it was very obvious how much sediment was on the reserve. So current state, as you can see here, this is about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, potentially. So there's been a lot more work happen now. We have a clear boat ramp, which is fantastic. And we're very close to being able to have waka ama return to use the boat ramp. They've been, I guess, the longest impacted from their training because they've not been able to access the boat ramp, which has reduced their ability to get waka into the water. Big vessels, and they needed the ramp. So we're working really closely with them on this site, and our planning team will be doing some work with those water codes on what the future state of this reserve looks like. It's very obvious from this event that we need to reconsider where buildings are placed on the reserve, what activities take place, and how we manage the assets that are attached to those reserves. So this is probably one of the most impacted and has been a significant job for our team, but we're really pleased to see it coming together, and we've been really, I guess, humbled by the community groups there. They've been really passionate and really driven to get back into the water, but they've also been really understanding and respectful of the work we're trying to do with the reserve and safety, which has been our primary key focus through all of this. Da Costa Park, so just behind us here at the end of Fitzgerald Street. So, and again, another unfortunate site for our waka ama and our water users. So again, you can see significant damage to infrastructure in the reserve. The water came up and had the ability to lift that container off of its foundations and offset it. So that is an asset of one of the leaseholders of this reserve. So we've not restored the asset, but what we have done is again, removed a lot of that sediment, re-leveled the park, topsoiled and reseeded that park. So encourage you, it's looking a bit long at the moment. We haven't mowed it yet because we're trying to let the grass recover. But you'll see it's really coming back to life again now. We have been successful, as you'll see, some of the water users have been able to return their vessels to racks and to start to access the water from the site. So we're really pleased with the outcomes in that one. Botanical Gardens, I'm sure we're aware of the impacts to the Botanical Gardens, the decision to dig the remaining softfall, so a large majority of the softfall was washed away in the cyclone, and a decision was made after some planning to remove the remaining softfall that was filled with sediment and likely contaminated, and to refill, so completely fill it with new softfall. So again, today we're hoping will be the last day of this project of restoring the softfall, which will be huge cheers from our office and also I'm sure all of our tamariki out in the community, because this is really one of our key playgrounds, or our key playground. It has been interesting watching the tamariki down in the park, and they've had a bit of excitement watching machinery and equipment and watching it come together. So that I think has been positive for them to see, and we're really looking forward to that being reopened. Nelson Park, we didn't do any remediation at this site, but we thought it was a good example just to demonstrate. So Nelson Park does have waterways running through one corner of the reserve, and obviously they were flooded, and the area of the park was completely inundated with water. So while a lot of natural retraction of the water occurred, what we have noticed in this site, and obviously across several of our reserves, is significant water in the ground. The water table is still very high. Conditions on the reserves are not ideal. And many of these, including Nelson Park, will have sports codes working on or utilising them. So we've had to shift some of that sporting, particularly football activity around on Nelson Park, just to be able to allow them to still continue training and playing. Unfortunately, we will need to wait some months for the ground conditions to dry out and the water level to decrease before we can consider what drainage is required to manage these events within our reserves, and that will be something that we'll have to put some significant planning and thought into. Doneraile Park, so a little remote in its sense from a day-to-day, and obviously quite impacted in an accessibility way because of the bridge being destroyed. This has been a really successful joint project between Journeys and Liveable Spaces, whereas we have been able to utilise existing roading contractors who have been up in the area, and they have supported us to utilise the site for their equipment and access, but also to help us remediate the site while they're there. So that's been a really good outcome. This one will be, unfortunately, probably another couple of months away before accessibility is clear and safe, but we're working through that with the Journeys team. Lots of woody debris to go from that site. Rere Falls, so we were really pleased to be able to put some comms out to the community before the long weekend that Rere Falls had reopened. The remediation work we completed here was, as you'll see, there's a massive undermining near the picnic benches there, and so we relocated those picnic benches up to an existing slab on higher ground, and we've had our recreational service provider service the area and just check for any other dropouts or areas of risk and concern, and after that it was determined that the site was safe and able to be opened again. So that was really exciting. There seemed to be some really positive feedback from the community in their trips up there over the long weekend, so that was great.
Our challenges at Taruhuru Cemetery have been groundwater and surface flooding. So immediately after Cyclone Gabrielle, we had groundwater at ground level. And that's what we're finding is that the Te Hapara Sands aquifer is taking a really, really long time, and unseasonably long time to recede. So that resulted in a 90-day suspension of burials until groundwater was at a level where we could where we were able to find land in the cemetery that was dry enough to bury again. And during that time, it took a sensitive and case-by-case basis with whānau that wanted to bury at that site. And they were offered, as I understand, some space in the hospital morgue to store their loved ones until such time as they could be interred. We were able to get back to ash interments within about a week, but yeah, it was 90 days until we were able to bury again. It has, although a really tough process, it has triggered some really good planning. So we've got emergency guidelines that are developed or being developed now for how we manage high groundwater in the future. We've had one such instance where we've had an extended closure of the Taruhiru Cemetery back in 2012, I believe, but this is really unusual for us, and the really slow receding of that aquifer has taken us all by a bit of surprise, and we're putting plans in place to make sure that we can manage that better in the future.
Woody debris on town beaches. So we were all well aware of woody debris and sensitivities, and topic is well spoken. That Liveable Spaces did implement the summer cleanups, and obviously after hail, then there was another deposit, and we started working closely with the forestry companies in their work to clean up the beaches. So our focus under existing consents that GDC hold was for the town beaches and for Uawa. So forestry were successful just before the Easter long weekend in a complete clean of our town beaches. And for those who were lucky enough to grab a snippet of it, it was fabulous. Unfortunately, only for about 48 hours before the weather events of Easter hit and all of the debris was returned to the beaches. So I know we're all frustrated by that, but it was from a project perspective. I know we were all quite disappointed. And so our focus did shift then to Uawa, which was also suffering from significant deposit on the southern and northern beaches. And obviously our community and our mana whenua there are already impacted. The jetty has been closed for some time, so collection of kaimoana has been a struggle for them. And so we were really keen to support forestry where we could to implement those cleanups. So they have completed both the southern and the northern beaches of Uawa now, which is great news. And again, feedback from the community has been positive. And I know Victor and our other hapu leads up there have been really closely involved in that process, which has been a great piece. Really good to see that engagement.
After Gabriel, the forestry companies came in and cleaned up the beach. And like you said, it was very short-lived, and then it's redeposited. Where are they standing? Where are we standing with the forestry companies as ongoing cleanups? Because just because we have one major cyclone, you don't have to go down anywhere down the beach now. It's not very attractive. So where are we at there with the forestry companies as an ongoing agreement?
After this meeting, Dave's giving us an update on woody debris. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Nat. And I was, oh, sorry.
Aroha mai, sorry, I missed I wasn't sure when we were taking questions, but they just back to the waka ama. Fantastic to see all the work that's been done. Must be a mountain of silt somewhere. But I think it was just in terms of the waka ama, and what about what about what's under the water? Where does that fit in terms of our responsibility? The concern that has been making on the water. What are the hazards that are in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I could talk a little bit to that, although I guess woody debris is in the water. Oh, yeah, sure. No worries, Dave.
Through you, Chair, those things are covered by our navigational safety bylaw. So the harbour master is the person who is in charge of those. So that's Peter Buell, who works on lifelines with me. So we have got it, that as part of the woody debris cleanup process that we need to do, is how we remove some of the underwater hazards that we have in our awa that are out here for wakaama, but also there's some other navigational issues that we're going to work through as well.
Oh, thank you for that. And just with the tarihiru, thanks Tyler for your update on that. You said this was out of the norm, but it's likely to be the norm going forward with the weather events that we're having. You have confidence in the plan that you've talked about that it will be able to cope? Or is there thought about maybe closing Taruhiru and having another urupa somewhere else?
The draft guidelines that are close to completion would indicate some easy, low-cost solutions, like groundwater mapping, so we understand our driest parts of the cemetery, and we can correspond that to a nearby monitoring bore, so that we know at certain levels there are certain plots that are suitable, and some forecasting, so that we can look at volume of rain over a time frame and estimate how high the aquifer is going to climb to within the cemetery. That's the easy stuff. The longer term solutions, it is likely to recommend that other land is acquired for a more future-proof urban cemetery, with a view that we do have rural drier cemeteries in Urupa, but there remains a desire for people to have a space which is closer to the city. We do have other land which has been set aside for a future cemetery site that's adjacent to Taruhiru, but it suffers the same issues as the current site. So in its draft form, it's recommending that, and it's going to be, I'm sure, an interesting point for this council to consider in the future.
And just further to that, through the chair, so we are just about to embark on some master planning work for our cemeteries here in Tairāwhiti, and that will, I guess, echo what Tyler's said around land acquisition and future requirements. And I guess one of the real sensitivities is around when you have a double plot. It's really hard to have the conversation with individuals about the thought or the prospect of burying elsewhere. So we are navigating all of that sensitivity.
Councillor Tupuna. Thank you for your chair. Sorry. It's interesting about the Salted Anzac Park, because back in the old days, back in pre-Captain Cook days, that was a really neat thing, because it meant that the gardens now had another layer of silt to grow food. Back when Anzac Park was a marae, it was a garden called anyway, whatever it was called. Those sorts of things with sediment were deemed to be a positive thing. And even woody debris was meant that the collection of firewood for families was something that was seen to be a positive. And I think the tone that we use, this is just a little suggestion, the tone that we use in our reporting does seem to have a somberness about it. And I'm wondering whether or not that's useful for our community in recovery. Particularly given the excellent results that have happened, I think, in a remarkably short time since that event, and from the images we have there, that we're not, and perhaps it's a Kiwi kind of thing, we're not boastful enough and just how well we've recovered. Physically, we can go for walks, we can go and sit at the picnic table at the waterfall, and we can enjoy our place. And that kind of discussion doesn't appear in the reports. And I think that's unfortunate. And that it doesn't bring hope and a positive spin to our community, but it also some way diminishes the effort that has gone in by the staff and all of those associated with that. So just a thought on our language use. In terms of the areas of parks that are quite heavily covered with water, where the water table and aquifers have risen up. Has there been any thought that those parts of the park be redesignated going forward as possible wetland areas and actually offer back that value to a recreational area. Whilst it might diminish our recreational use to some extent, they're unable to use it because of all the problems that we have with it. That may be, rather than trying to fix it, is actually to identify areas where we can offer back to the environment. Just a thought there. In terms of taruhiru, I've had a number of observations from folk visiting their relatives in there that the graves have actually moved. And whether or not there was any thought of resurfacing or re-leveling that, so at least on appearance, Granddad is, on level.
We do have a piece of work at the moment underway where we're just receiving some quotes and looking at options to do that, to refill and just to realign the plots through the cemetery.
And on Mrs. Makorori Woody debris one, so I'll leave that till there. I noticed in the report on page 59, there's a mention of beaches being closed during the event.
Correct.
Was one of those beaches, wasn't it?
It was. That was under the state of emergency period.
Yeah. I'm wondering whether or not there, in the future, be thoughts of where and for how long those closures are in place to safeguard the community post the event. And I'm referencing, of course, the little boy who was killed at Waitanai, that the use of that provision be given some thought on how we can, over time, better look after our community post.
Thank you. Councillor Tibbet.
Kia ora, thank you very much for the report. I've got 3 issues. I wonder if it's okay to place them all consecutively or just do one at a time. What would you prefer?
Sorry.
Is it better to place all 3 at once or one at a time?
If they're
Up to you.
relevant, but
Okay.
can't come in front of us, yeah, sure.
My first issue is in relation to, it's a cultural matter in relation to the young boy that died. Has there been a hiki te tapu ceremony for that boy's death on that beach? And that's number 1. Number 2, still staying in a cultural frame. I wonder if somewhere in our work, maybe it's little communities, maybe it's in spatial planning, I'm not sure. But I know that we're in the space of cleaning up, but I also want to understand that while we're taking cognizance of the effect upon the human species, are we doing similarly as well for understanding the biodiversity displacement and also what might be required for the regeneration of our biodiversity displacement? Simply because we as humans cannot function well if those species are not being properly taken care of too. And of course, the synergistic relationship between humans and those spaces. My third question is to ask in the matter of taruhiru, has there been an opportunity to seek some understanding from Te Whānau Āiwi out there at taruhiru? Because my childhood learning tells me that in the Mōteateo Pōpō, that the space of taruhiru used to be completely huge kumara pits in its time, and whether or not that has any relativity to what you're experiencing now in terms of its historical, geographical usage back in the time pre-colonization, I'm saying way back, that there could be in the historical cultural narrative some really key help that could assist the work that you're thinking about today, and that it could sit right within that particular form of scholarship. Kia ora tātou. Hiki te tapu is, in Māori culture, when there is a tragic death, there needs to be 1, the notification that that's happened, 2, also to usually a state of rahui is placed, which is restriction of eating food, taking food, or being in the space. And the point of that is that a rahui allows at least 1 turning of the tide before anybody can go back to that space to get anything, at the minimum 1 turning of a tide. Also too, once that's done, then hiki te tapu as a ceremony to be able to lift that so that the space between tapu and no is responded to. Also, I think it's important because in Māori cultural frame of reference, the wood/issue that we have here belongs to a transgression between Tāne and Tāwhiriwātea in our worldview. And Nadine's just answered saying, yes, there was, Rhonda. Thank you, that's the hiki te tapu. So I'll stop here. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Rhonda, for those points. I'll just touch on the second point around the biodiversity displacement. So in terms of our recovery, we have very much been in a recovery space to really ensure that these spaces are safe for our community, and it's been a very short-term process. But what I do want to say is that in the long term, we are looking to do a review of our future direction, and with the cyclone and future cyclone events in mind. So as you can imagine, that is a big piece of work, and that will take time. But as we progressively review our community facility strategy, which is essentially our guiding piece for our open spaces, we will contemplate that. There's also a number of pieces of work underway through the recovery team in terms of the natural environment that will may contemplate some of this as well.
Pick up the presentation again. I can just speak to the taruhiru point as well. Yeah, that's an incredibly interesting thought. And when we started that piece of work, we were weighing up whether to progress a cemeteries master plan, which we had begun scoping pre-cyclone, or these emergency guidelines to give our staffs the tools to know when they should close or restrict services. I can see that where we had been thinking that was a part of cemeteries master plan, there's some important thinking that might sit in these guidelines as well. So that's something we take away.
Thank you. I will now pass over to Penny Walsh, our Cultural Activities Manager, and we'll go through the rest of the slides.
Morena koutou. Councillor Tupara, your wish is my command, and I am about to sparkle joy upon you all. So following the in cultural activities, that's the 2 theatres and the library and Parutahi Hall as far as facilities go. So they're pretty new facilities and they held up really well. We were prepared because that Saturday before Cyclone Hail was strongly easterly, so we sandbagged up on the eastern sides because we got hit with that. So we got off relatively unscathed as far as the facilities went. So it was really everything in our recovery spaces around people and services. People stayed away. They just have stayed away for a very long time. We've had 50 cancellations throughout the facilities, including some really big events, simply because they couldn't come here. They couldn't bring people here, and there was nowhere for them to stay as well in the numbers that they were coming. So we spun around around people. The first slide was about the Starlink that was at the Lawson Field and the library. So that was more a response thing than a recovery thing. And since in the recovery field, we've had a few fundraisers, one for Te Karakia, led by a person who actually completely lost her house, which was amazing that she decided to give all the profits for that play to TK. The Harmonic Resonators, a band, came, and it was just call her, and it was just to make everyone feel better. And the theatre was packed, and it was a really good time. Apparently, I was out of town. We've had, I'll go on to the murals. This is one that was initiated in part by Tyler, which is down at Waikanae. The basketball court or tennis court was split into 2, made into 2 half courts. And then through events and people coming together, it was a joint project between Council, Basketball New Zealand, Gisborne Basketball and Hoya Gallery, and it looks pretty cool. Councillor Tibble, interesting that you mentioned the kumara on the taruhiru, because further along the Tarahiru up by Nelson Park, a mural is going up there, and that is, the subject matter of it is Hene Hakarirangi and the arrival of the kumara. And yes, that patch is a well-known area, but also very well known for the growing of the hui as well. Apparently that was the primo spot up there. So that's going to be the basis of that one. And it's being led by an artist that is teaches at Nauri o Māori. And so she will be doing the storytelling, and we'll bring in the other schools and the sports groups as well. So there's another little bit of joy and storytelling going onwards. And just on the next slide is just a little picture of a group of children at the library. This was the first time people started coming back. They've started coming back. They've started going out. They've started, well, I've noticed they started going to restaurants and things as well. So that one was Grad Life by the Bricks, which is, we got a Lego master in Gisborne, which is a big deal. And there is a wellness program associated with that. And that went so well. The children and their families were so invigorated by it that we'll be extending that program out a lot further in the future. And then on top of that, of course, there's people's personal possessions that all got yuki, like photographs and things. And we had Fuji come to Gisborne to, they did everything for free, and they've taken the whole people's memoirs away to restore. And also in the museum space, they've been in particular going to Marae and helping out there with more objects rather than papers in the restoration space. So I hope that brings you joy about the people coming together and coming out again. And that's where our plans in the future for the extension of the recovery phase is, to bring people together and help them out with whatever they need, particularly in that wellness space.
Thanks, Penny. And if we don't have any questions, I'll hand over to Kerry Hudson, our Integrated Catchments Manager.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I think we've got some quite positive stuff there as well, and Councillor Tupper will be pretty pleased with some of that. So I'll go through this. In the short term, our issues have been disruptions with access, and pretty amazed how some of the state highway and the council roads have been put back in place. On-farm access is really difficult. We've got to be really careful with the ongoing weather conditions, how wet tracks are, and the health and safety issues. In terms of biosecurity, we're back into poisoning in the Hawke's Bay buffer zone for possums to control TB, and that's been really disrupted, but we're right back in place with it now. And those disruptions have been for all parts of integrated catchments across the whole wider district. We also, as everyone's aware, we've had lots of erosion. We haven't got too far about dealing with too much of it yet, and that's a planning aspect coming up. One success in what we've shown in here, and we started a project with a trust group in Ruatoria 2019, installing sediment traps. And these are designed that we look at building traps in the spring. Hopefully they're going to fill up over the next few months. We are, instead of filling them up over several months, we're filling them up overnight. And so our advancement there has been dramatic. So the one we've got there filled up overnight. The following week, we built another one. That would be usually a delay of about 6 months before you got the next one in. And there's one gully at between Tiki and Te Aroa that we've installed about 8 in the last 6 months. That would have been a 3 or 4 year project in the past, and they're just filling up overnight. So we're not capturing that much silt, but we are stabilising those gullies, and we'll grow trees in them into the long term. As Michelle mentioned, and what Councillor Tibble was referring to with biodiversity, we're certainly taking a very different look to how we do rehabilitation work now and into the future, and biodiversity plays a big part in that. There's going to be a big change coming with that, and how we deal with some of the land that should be taken from plantation forestry, how we might go about that. We are a little unknown how we deal with some of the really highly eroded land. That has been a challenge until now and will continue to be so. But we need to be looking at that quite differently. And the other aspect, that another thing that has been quite positive for us is some of the incentives we've picked up recently in terms of capability, capacity we can build across particularly our land management staff. And one of the things we've got there is an issue I spoke with Councillor Parada before the election about some coastal planting sites, and we've received some funding for that. And we've got 3 sites for that, and I'll get back to you about that in the near future.
Thank you, Kerry. So I'll briefly speak to the aquatics. So in terms of immediately post-cyclone, you'll be aware that our aquatics facility was closed, particularly around the critical water situation. So our staff were redeployed and did some fantastic work out there, utilising their skills. You can see some rescues. I know the middle picture was taken out at Makaraka, and yeah, obviously filling sandbags, and also a real focus around general wellbeing out in the community. So in terms of recovery, Kiwa Pools continues to track well. However, the cyclone did have an impact in terms of contractor availability. So there was some slip there, but they are all back in action and progressing well. Super excited about what's ahead of us in terms of the opening for Kiwa. In terms of recovery with the Olympic Pools complex, so we've had over 8,400 admissions and more than 136 schools bookings have occurred. So that's getting people back out, getting students back out into the complex to business as usual. So I'll skip over to Amy, who is online, to briefly speak about the Waiangaki transformation plan.
Morena koutou, ko Amy England aho. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Great. Just a quick update for you on Waiangaki. The problem that we had, as many people did following the cyclone, was access to Waiangaki. So both Tarewa and Waiangaki roads suffered significant damage. We lost a portion of Tarewa Road here completely, and we had multiple slips and slumps and dropouts and other damage. So to enable critical infrastructure repairs to take place, both to the roading and the pipeline, we paused all work on site for a period of 4 weeks. During that time, we redeployed our Waiangaki Ngāhere Order team to response and recovery activities. And I just want to take the opportunity to give a big mihi to the team. They jumped in with both feet and took on all the work that was given to them, no matter where it was or what it was, and they showed real piritahi. They stepped up to help wherever it was needed, so I know that was appreciated. If we can go to the next slide, thank you. So we've sustained quite a bit of damage up at Waiangaki, multiple slips throughout both the harvested areas, but also I have to note that within the Waiangaki Kiwi2 bush itself, which is under, Indigenous forest canopy, we sustained quite a bit of damage in there as well. So the scale of the event is really clear to see when you look at that. The Ngāhere Order team have been working on inspecting all the internal trap lines within the Kiwi2 bush, and they've had to reroute some of these, but they've got them all back up and running now. We've completed some preliminary assessment of the damage on site, and Dr. Murray Cave has got a program of work with GNS to undertake more detailed analysis, both of the number of slips and the area affected. And we really need that information to inform ETS requirements for reporting and supplying evidence to Te Ururako. And it will also be used to inform our insurance and our funders as well of what we're looking at on site. Health and safety has been a big concern for us. You can see from some of those images on the previous slide that we're working around the damage in our planting areas. And we have amended our planting plans to remove areas of high risk, both for health and safety reasons and also to minimise the risk of losing more plants on slopes that we believe are still mobile and might move further over winter. We're back to BAU, which is great news, and we've had some really good BAU happening at the moment. So key focus for us is the planting season ahead, and we'll be planting approximately 112 hectares this year with native plants. The two kind of key priorities for identifying our planting areas are one, establishing quick cover on the higher risk slopes and gullies, and particularly those adjacent to pipeline infrastructure. And the second priority is making sure that we are meeting our ETS replant requirements. So we have quite a lot of careful planning that goes into which areas will be planted in any given year to make sure that we're covering those risks off. The other focus for us at the moment is our ongoing pest control. So we had some wax tag monitoring undertaken. Our team undertook wax tag monitoring in the Kiwi2 bush late last year, which showed we had very high numbers of possums present. The team has since been carrying out a possum control operation over the last 3 or 4 weeks. They've been pre-feeding, so you can see in the image on the left there, 3 bags stapled to a tree. Those are filled with some delicious pre-feed that the possums like. So it draws the possums to those sites. They know to come back and look for food there, and then we can go and apply the toxin. So the toxin is in a similar little bag, and we staple a number of those to the trees and allow the possums to come to those sites and feed on those. We'll follow that up with another wax tag monitor over winter or into spring, just to assess the effectiveness of the knockdown. And we anticipate needing to do another couple at least of these runs to get numbers down to a low residual level. We had an ungulate culling run planned for February, and that had to be delayed, but we're really glad that they managed to get this completed in May. They got good coverage of the area and good results with the animals as well. So 133 goats, 18 deer and 11 pigs removed, or controlled, I should say, within the area. And our contractors, Trap and Trigger, are working closely with the Ngāi Tāmanuhiri hunting ropu, and they had 5 hunters who worked a total of 10 hunter days with them on this run. They were able to recover some carcasses for processing and distribution of kai to the whānau. And we have a hui planned with that group later this month, in which we'll be having some guest speakers coming along to speak about sustained pest control from a mātauranga perspective. So yeah, a busy winter season ahead with our planting and our pest control operations, and hopefully some wins on the board to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
Question, Councillor Robertson.
Is Amy the person to ask about the transformation program, the planting out? So paragraph 30, page 65, talks about the impact of manuka being grown at our 2 nursery suppliers being reduced, but there's no clarity of what number or percentage impact that has. That would be helpful. So is it 10%, 5%, 50%, 10,000 plants? And what flow-on effect will that have for the next planting season, if any, please?
Through the chair, that's a good question. We had one supplier who has had a significant loss of plants, of Manuka plants, unfortunately. We're talking about 100,000 plants that they were unable to supply to us. They are based up in Northland, and they were significantly hit by all the bad weather that's occurred in Northland over summer, and that impacted the plants. In terms of planting area, it hasn't changed what we're going to plant this year. What we have done is had to reduce the number of plants going into some areas, and we've looked pretty carefully about where we can reduce the number of plants. What we've done also is, so we have in any given area in year 1 of planting, we plant a nursery crop of Manuka, and then in year 2 we go back to that area and we plant with mixed native species. So we're looking at shrub hardwoods and canopy species such as tōtara and rewa and what have you. What we are doing this year is diverting some of the shrub hardwood species from our year 2 planting to help fill in some of the gaps where we've had losses of Manuka and where we feel like we need to get additional plants in the ground this year for stability purposes. So there's been a bit of juggling. How that impacts on future years is that obviously we are still under funding agreements for some of this planting, and we will need to look at variations to those funding agreements to shift some of that planting out to future years, and along with it the respective milestone payments from the funders.
And just further to Amy's point, we have also noticed a natural reversion, increased natural reversion, more than what we were anticipating, which is actually helping with that regeneration cover, except where we've got major slips. So that's another factor that we're considering.
So supplementary question would be, do the source nurseries have the capacity to make up the lost numbers within the timeframes to fit our planting schedule? And if not, are we looking for other source nurseries?
Through the chair, the short answer to that is yes, the capacity is not a problem, just an unfortunate chain of events with the Manuka and the weather this year.
Thank you, Chair. I'm old enough and deaf enough to share some experience in scrub cutting. Was my university weekend job, university holiday job. Back then, the farmers were subsidised to chop the scrub down, and it was a significant cost. That area of chopped land, unless managed hard with hard grazing, would revert quickly back to scrub from the seed that was left behind. So, in looking at the size of those plants and knowing what plants cost, and I do know that there's some trials happening, but I think we should really push hard into using seeding as a way of going forward with quick regeneration of land.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I just had a question in regards to the Manuka and being part of the myrtle family and the myrtle rust issue that we have in the Tairāwhiti. Has there been any consideration around the impact that myrtle rust may have on the Manuka?
Through the chair, yes, that's another really good question. When we entered into a procurement process for plant supply, that was one of the big considerations that we had around how to manage the risk of plants having myrtle rust in the nursery and us potentially losing a year's worth of supply through that, or inadvertently bringing myrtle rust to Wainaki. As far as we know, at the moment, Wainaki is free of myrtle rust. So we put a lot of plans in place and we stipulated in our supply contracts that all of the manuka grown must be grown in accordance with New Zealand plant producers guidance for myrtle species. So that includes regular inspections, application of fungicides in the nursery, and inspection prior to dispatch to ensure that the plants coming to us do not have a myrtle rust infection before we plant them out into Wainaki. Should myrtle rust appear at Wainaki through natural, wind dispersal, which is most likely how it will arrive there, there is not a lot that we can do at that point in time. There are some trials I'm aware of in other parts of the country with highly susceptible species such as Lophomertis, where they have a practice of actually going out and spraying those plants with fungicides in situ, but that wouldn't be something we would consider for Wainaki just due to the scale of the project. What we do have, and what Michelle has alluded to, is very good natural regeneration occurring. So the manuka is, as we say, just a nurse species. It's not a long-lived species. So we do anticipate that it will be replaced over time with more shrub hardwoods and canopy species.
Thank you.
Councillor Telfer.
Amy, just considering what we've just been through and what's now that we've got all the photos, we've seen what's happened up there with the whole water line and everything. I'm just curious to know whether there's been any thought about maybe reviewing the plan for this whole block, because I remember there was an area identified that was basically offered to Duke and Nisho to carry on with and replant, which when we went for a tour up there, the councillors, quite a few of us went up there and had a look. The area that we looked at, we were taken to that they were harvesting was pretty easy contoured country. I'm just wondering whether or not the ongoing cost and everything else, whether there's a possibility of having a relook and so we can actually prioritise all our spend on the areas that need it. And there may be some other forestry company that's well interested in looking at those specific parts of that block that don't actually impact on that water supply. So, we are going to have to make some tighten our belt and live within our means. I'm wondering whether or not this project is one that there are real priority areas that we could put all our spend into. Yeah, that's all.
Through the chair. So yes, there was an area that we discussed with Jukin about going back into a second rotation of pine. They declined that. So under the current forestry right agreement that we have with them, they had first right of refusal to put that area back into plantation species, and they did decline that. So we went through a process then to identify a third party who would be able to replant the area. And we did that with in conjunction with Maraitaha Incorporated. We went to market for that, and we have identified Elands as a supplier who are now looking at putting, or have started putting, that area into manuka also for apiary purposes. So in terms of reviewing what's left to harvest, there's very, very little left to harvest up there. And what is there has previously been decided to be put back into native. What I will say though about that approach is we're very conscious of the costs of the replanting, and we are looking at excluding areas from the replanting which are doing very well in terms of the natural reversion, so that we're not planting areas that don't need to be planted. And we're having conversations with our funders about redirecting funding towards the activities that support the managed reversion, such as the ongoing weed control and the pest control, and instead of putting the funding into the planting itself.
Yep, thanks, Amy. And I'll just conclude. Abby Banks is our Community Facilities Partnerships Advisor, and she's prepared these couple of slides. But in terms of recovery for community facilities, the real focus was on reconnecting codes and clubs with their spaces and places, and working through each, particularly where there was an impact on the early wins projects through the community facilities strategy. Reviewing those projects and where required, actually having to pivot or turn in terms of rethinking and reimagining those spaces. So the Wakaama is a really good example of that, and quite a bit of work has gone into that from Abby and the team. And in terms of business as usual, we are really focused on obviously those early wins projects and getting those over the line, noting that we as council are a facilitator. We're not actually leading those early wins projects. And one of the big projects that is coming up through our community and is on the community facilities business case agenda is the indoor sports stadium. So that will be coming through out in the community. So there's some early feasibility work that we'll be getting underway with on that. And that's the end of our presentation.
So was it?
I think that's an example of an indoor stadium somewhere. Okay, I want that one. So I just
So I don't know how much you're able to tell us, but I know the Wakaama facilities was an early win that was really just about to happen. So I guess we're looking at a different location.
Yeah, so there's a rethink happening about, in terms of the Wakaama, it was about to happen, but through extensive consultation and engagement with the clubs, it has been decided that that existing location is no longer fit for purpose. So, so there is going to be another process to go through. Yeah, and I guess I just wanted to finish by saying that I am really proud of the Liveable Communities Hub. They have done a great job in supporting the response and recovery, and yeah, just mihi to the team. So kia ora.
All right. That's it.
Just when on my absent-mindedness, the marae at Anzac Park is Mangamutu. It's named for the little river that flows down what I think Councillor Pahuru refers to as Lover's Lane. That is originally the Mangamutu River. And the marae was adjacent. Mangamutu.
All right, well, thanks for that update, and it was just a report for noting, so I'll have to move that. If there's someone, and Councillor Foster seconded. There's nothing further on those. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And that's the end of our meeting. We'll just have Councillor Foster up here a minute. He's got to cover off the public excluded minutes from his last meeting. And then we've got workshop and an update from Dave.
Just do this quickly and then do I need to do the go through the apologies and all that?
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you do those ones in the public,
yeah,
go to public.
That's excluded. Good, everybody. Welcome to the operations infrastructure. This is the quickest meeting on record. I just want to acknowledge the work of Dave and his team at Lifelines. They're under the pump. They've got so much work happening with the recovery and everything, and so that's influenced this operations infrastructure non-committee meeting. Anyway, we'll go through the proceedings. Apologies from the Mayor and Councillor Rea. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Thanks. Councillor Robinson, and seconded by Councillor Wharenga. Thank you. There's no declarations of interest. confirmation of the non-confidential minutes, and that's on page 7. Mover by councillor Whaihinga, seconded by councillor Thompson. All those in favour? Right, carried. No leave of absence, acknowledges and tributes, Selwyn, Parata, well, Andy's covered that, so that was fantastic, thank you.
We have matters arising.
Oh, sorry, you have, okay, matters. Yep. No. Yeah, sorry, councillor Elder, matters arriving.
Thank you, Chair. Again, declaring my interest in the TRI River catchment, and just wanting to say that that catchment is still waiting to hear what its future is. There is a group out there that are trying to farm as usual, and yet they have this weight over them, and that is the state of the TRI, which is likely to dam again at any time. They need some security in their future. Thank you.
Through the chair, that's not matters arising. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, point of order. Yeah. Oh, okay, we'll move on. Public input and petitions, there is none. There is no extraordinary business. Notice of motion, none. Adjourn business. So next we'll go to public excluded. I'll move that we go into public excluded. Seconded by councillor Parata. All those in favour?